My boyfriend scoffed, "Please, you'd never survive without me. You'd probably crash the entire server within a week." I replied, "Is that so?" Then I took the promotion abroad, rented a new apartment, and rerouted my emails. When he showed up at my old place with a grand speech prepared, the new tenant opened the door instead. "Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. My name is Hazel. I'm 34 years old, and by any objective measure, I've always considered myself a competent, capable woman. My job title is Senior Software Architect at a major global tech firm. It's a fancy way of saying that I design the blueprints for massive, complex cloud systems. My work is a world of logic, precision, and foresight, where a single misplaced line of code can have catastrophic consequences. I am good at what I do. I can, despite what my now ex-boyfriend might believe, successfully debug a legacy codebase written in a language that's been obsolete for a decade without crying. I am not, by any definition you could find in a dictionary, a helpless person. Yet, for the last 5 years of my life, I existed in a meticulously constructed state of curated helplessness. It was a role, a character, carefully and almost artistically crafted for me by Jasper. He was 35 when we broke up, a social media influencer whose entire universe was built on the shaky foundations of image, perception, and curation. Our relationship began, as so many toxic things do, with a whirlwind of intoxicating charm. I met him at an art gallery opening that a work friend had dragged me to. I was feeling out of place in my simple black dress, surrounded by people who seemed to speak a different language of air kisses and vague pronouncements about the scene. He approached me with a smile that could disarm nations. He wasn't like the others. He asked me about my work, and when I told him what I did, his eyes lit up with what I mistook for genuine fascination. He called my mind brilliant and quirky. He made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt before. For a woman who spent her days in the abstract world of code, his very tangible, confident presence was magnetic. When he moved into my apartment a year later, the apartment I'd secured and furnished with my own hard-earned salary, he brought that professional skill set of curation home with him. My quiet, orderly life became his new project. His new brand extension. It started so small, so subtly, that I barely even noticed it. It was like a piece of software being infected with malware, one tiny, imperceptible line of code at a time. He'd gently suggest different clothes for me to wear to company events. "Babe," he'd say, holding up 2 dresses, "this one is fine, it's functional. But this one is aspirational. It tells a story." My story, apparently, was one he needed to write. So I'd wear the aspirational dress. Then he turned his attention to my home office, my sanctuary. I had it set up for maximum efficiency, monitors at the perfect height, cables neatly managed, hardware components organized in labeled bins. One weekend, while I was visiting my parents, I came home to find he had completely rearranged it. My ergonomic chair was replaced with a stylish but horribly uncomfortable designer one. My practical cable ties were gone, replaced by a chaotic but aesthetically pleasing jumble. "I just improved the creative flow for you," he announced proudly. My workflow was destroyed for a week, but I thanked him because it was easier than explaining the complex logic of my original system. He took over our social calendar with the ruthless efficiency of a corporate takeover. My old, comfortable friends from college, the ones I could talk to about obscure programming languages and sci-fi novels, were slowly and methodically filtered out. He never said, "Don't see them." It was far more insidious than that. He'd schedule a must-attend networking event on the same night I had plans with my friend Sarah. Or he'd invite my friends to one of his parties, then spend the whole night making them feel unsophisticated and out of place with inside jokes and name-dropping, until they just stopped wanting to come over. I remember one night so clearly. Sarah had called, just to catch up. We'd known each other since we were 18, bonding over late-night coding sessions fueled by cheap pizza. Hearing her voice was like a breath of fresh air. We were laughing about one of our old professors when Jasper walked over. He was getting ready for some influencer gala. He leaned down, kissed my forehead, and whispered in my ear, his voice a silken command, "Keep it short, babe. We don't want to lower our energy before the event. Your friend's vibe is a little static." A hot wave of shame washed over me. I looked at the phone in my hand, at the name of my oldest friend on the screen. And I made an excuse. I told her I had to go, that something had come up. The silence on her end was brief, but I heard the hurt in it. "Oh. Okay, Hazel. Talk to you later, I guess." I hung up and felt a piece of myself wither and die. Every single act of control was masterfully framed as an act of loving improvement. He wasn't being controlling, he was elevating my lifestyle. He wasn't isolating me, he was curating our social brand. He'd say these things with such conviction that I started to believe them myself. And I, a woman who designed systems to resolve conflict and create order, chose to avoid it in my own home. I valued peace in my personal life more than the exhausting, circular arguments I knew I could never truly win. He didn't fight with logic, he fought with emotion. He'd accuse me of being cold, unfeeling, too logical, until I was the one apologizing, just to make the emotional storm pass. I was the textbook definition of the frog in boiling water. He turned up the heat so gradually, so masterfully, that I had convinced myself the suffocating warmth was comfort. I'd spend my days at work leading a team of brilliant engineers, making high-stakes decisions that impacted our company's salary commitments and bottom line. I was respected, I was authoritative. But the moment I walked through the door of my own home, I'd hand over that authority. I'd become the woman who supposedly couldn't be trusted to choose the right brand of olive oil because it didn't fit the narrative of our kitchen. The power imbalance was staggering, but I willfully ignored it. He was a master of public perception, and that extended to our private life with a chilling hypocrisy. He would openly, shamelessly flirt with other women, both online and in person. He'd slide into the DMs of models and aspiring actresses half his age, and when I'd summoned the courage to mention it, he'd laugh it off with that disarming smile. "It's just networking, Hazel. It's my job. You're in a very old-fashioned industry, you don't understand how branding works in 2025. Then he'd deliver the final, crushing blow. "Honestly, you should be grateful I still come home to you. A lot of guys would be bored to tears by a woman who'd rather talk about Python scripts than parties in the Hollywood Hills." He would say it as if he were paying me a compliment on my loyalty. He treated me like a dependable, comfortable piece of furniture. A loyal dog that would always be there, wagging its tail, when he got home from chasing squirrels. I was a convenient, high-earning doormat. And the worst part, the part that still fills me with a cold shame when I think about it, is that for a long, long time, I let him. I believed that his watered-down, curated affection was all I deserved. My one true private passion, the one thing I kept sacred and just for myself, was designing and building custom mechanical keyboards. I know, it sounds incredibly nerdy. But to me, it's a form of art. It's the perfect blend of my skills, electrical engineering, software development, and a deep appreciation for design and ergonomics. It requires immense patience, a steady hand for soldering hundreds of tiny components, and a deep understanding of electronics and firmware. In a small spare room, the one room he hadn't completely taken over, I have a workshop. It's my sanctuary. It's filled with schematics, trays of colorful switches, bags of custom-molded keycaps, and the faint, sharp smell of solder and ozone. It was the only place in the apartment where I felt truly like myself. I've built keyboards that are, if I do say so myself, works of art. I built one with a polished wood case and keycaps that looked like old typewriter keys. I built another that was split into two halves, with tiny OLED screens on each thumb cluster that I coded myself to display my typing speed. Jasper called it my tinkering room. He called my complex, beautiful creations my clacky plastic toys. He never once asked about the process. He never saw the skill, the artistry, or the technical brilliance that went into them. All he saw was a childish, messy habit that clashed with the sleek, minimalist, high-powered image he was trying to project for our brand. One afternoon, I was hunched over my workbench, completely lost in a state of flow. I was working on a new design, soldering hair-thin wires to a microcontroller. It was delicate work. The house was quiet. For a few blissful hours, I'd forgotten about everything else. The front door opened and closed. A few minutes later, Jasper appeared at the doorway of my workshop. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at his phone, a frown on his face. "Hey, babe," he said, his voice laced with annoyance. "My engagement on that last post is tanking. I think the algorithm is penalizing me." He walked in, stepping over a box of components. "Caleb and I are thinking of doing a spontaneous live stream about power couple finances. You know, to create some more authentic, relatable content. Can you pull up your latest salary statement? I want to use your numbers as an example of a solid, stable secondary income stream that supports the primary creative partner." Secondary income stream. My six-figure salary, the one that paid the mortgage, the bills, the groceries, and for most of his designer clothes, was a secondary stream. I didn't look up from the circuit board. A tiny plume of smoke rose from the solder. "It's on my desktop, in the finances folder," I said, my voice tight. He found it, then turned back to me. "And could you maybe clean up in here a little?" he added, waving a dismissive hand at my organized chaos. "It looks like a teenager's bedroom. It's so off-brand. My friend Tristan is coming over later, he's a creative director for a big fashion label. I can't have him seeing this." The dismissal, the casual disrespect for my work and my space, was a familiar sting. I just nodded, my eyes still fixed on the circuit board in front of me. The final, irrevocable boiling point was reached 2 months ago. It was a Tuesday. I remember the sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my boss's office. My boss, Ms. Albright, is a legend in the tech world. She's a woman in her late 50s who shattered every glass ceiling she ever encountered with a sledgehammer of pure competence. She looked at me from across her large, immaculate desk, her expression serious but kind. "Hazel," she began, folding her hands. "The board has just greenlit the new European data center project in Berlin. It's the single biggest infrastructure investment this company has made in a decade. The architecture has to be flawless, scalable, and secure. We need our absolute best mind leading it. We need you." I was stunned into silence. I just stared at her. "Me?" I finally managed to whisper. "You," she confirmed with a firm nod. "I've seen your work on the Phoenix project. Your designs are more than just functional, they're elegant. This is the next step. It's a 2-year posting. You'll be based out of our main European headquarters. It's a massive promotion, a title bump to principal architect, and a very significant increase to your salary. The kind of career-defining work that sets you up for life. The job is yours if you want it." A wave of pure, unadulterated joy washed over me. It felt like I was floating. For a moment, I forgot about Jasper, about the curated life, about the clacky plastic toys. I was just Hazel, the architect, being recognized for her work. That feeling of elation lasted for exactly 1 hour, the duration of my commute home. I rehearsed how I would tell him, imagining his surprise, his pride. I burst through the door, my face beaming. "Jasper! You are not going to believe the news I have." He was in the living room, surrounded by lighting equipment, trying to get the perfect shot of a gifted bottle of whiskey for an Instagram post. He said, not looking at me, squinting at the screen of his camera. "Can you move a bit to the left? You're casting a shadow." I moved, my smile faltering slightly. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The project. The promotion. The move to Berlin. I watched his face, waiting for the excitement, for a simple "congratulations, I'm so proud of you." Instead, I got a frown of logistical annoyance. He put the camera down and finally looked at me, his brow furrowed. Berlin, he said, as if tasting a sour piece of fruit. For 2 years. Wow. He let out a long, dramatic sigh. What a hassle. I'll have to find all new contacts, a whole new network. The shipping for all my equipment is going to be a nightmare. And we'll have to put most of this ugly furniture you love into storage. My personal brand is much more suited to a minimalist, Scandinavian aesthetic, you know? The pronoun we was instantaneous and absolute. There was no discussion. There was no question of if he would be coming along for my promotion. He immediately began planning his new life, pacing the living room as he brainstormed. This could actually be huge for the brand, he mused, talking more to himself than to me. We can reinvent ourselves. The American tech genius and her creative director partner take Europe. I'll need an apartment with great natural light for content creation. Something in knit, maybe. We'll need a guest room for when other influencers visit for collabs. My career achievement, the single biggest moment of my professional life, the culmination of a decade of relentless hard work, late nights, and sacrifices, was merely a new backdrop for his social ambitions. My promotion was just a plot device in the ongoing story of him. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. I had to try, one last time, to claim a piece of this for myself. I was thinking, I started, my voice barely more than a whisper, that maybe I would go alone for the first couple of months. You know, just to settle into the new role, find my footing, get the project off the ground. He stopped pacing and turned to look at me. His face was a perfect mask of utter disbelief. And then he let out a sound that would become the catalyst for everything that followed. It was a short, sharp, barking laugh. A sound of pure, unadulterated dismissal. A sound I had heard 1,000 times before, directed at my clothes, my friends, my hobbies. But this time, it was directed at the very core of who I was. Go alone? He scoffed, his voice dripping with a thick, condescending pity that made my skin crawl. Oh, sweetie. Please, Hazel, you'd never survive without me. You can barely talk to the DoorDash guy without getting awkward. You live in your little tech bubble. I handle the real world for us. He took a step closer, patting my cheek as if I were a child. You'd probably crash the entire server within a week. Let's be honest, you get by on luck and charm, not skill. You need me to manage things. Don't be ridiculous. And that was it. That was the moment. The water didn't just hit a rolling boil, it flash vaporized, blowing the lid off the pot. All my accomplishments, all my professional competence, my entire adult life, erased. Dismissed. Belittled. By that single, cutting, deeply gendered insult. He didn't see a partner he was proud of. He saw a helpless dependent, a bumbling child who needed his worldly guidance. He saw a project he managed, a well-paying pet he had successfully house-trained. A strange, cold calm washed over me. It was the same feeling I got right before solving a particularly difficult system crash. All the chaotic emotions, the years of resentment, the swallowed arguments, the quiet humiliations suddenly shut down, and my brain switched to pure, crystalline logic. The problem had been identified. A solution was required. I looked at him, the man who thought he had built me, the man who was now casually checking his reflection in the dark screen of the TV, and I made a decision. Is that so? I said. My voice was quiet, almost eerily calm. He didn't notice the shift in tone. He had already turned his attention back to more important matters. Of course it is, sweetie, he said, picking up his phone again. Now, let's look at apartments in MIT. I'm thinking something with an industrial loft vibe. It'll be great for the brand. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just nodded, a small, tight movement of my head. I let him believe he had one. I watched him scroll through photos of beautiful, sun-drenched apartments in a city we would never live in together. Because in that precise moment, I had already left. My body was still standing in the living room, but my mind was already gone. It was designing the architecture of my escape. He just didn't know it yet. The next morning, I walked into Ms. Albright's office. I remember my steps echoing in the quiet hallway. I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. I closed the door behind me and stood in front of her desk. "I'll take the job," I said, my voice firm and clear. "The project starts in 60 days. I'll be ready." Ms. Albright smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "I knew you would. Congratulations, Hazel. This is the beginning of something great for you." She had no idea how right she was. That day, I began the most complex architectural project of my entire life, the complete, silent, and systematic disentanglement of my existence from Jasper's. I started living a double life. I operated in two parallel worlds, running two different operating systems in my head simultaneously. In World A, I was the dutiful, slightly overwhelmed girlfriend. I'd come home from work and listen patiently to his endless, self-aggrandizing plans for our fabulous new life in Europe. I'd nod along as he debated the merits of different neighborhoods in Berlin based entirely on their Instagrammability and proximity to trendy coffee shops. I'd offer vague, non-committal opinions on furniture and color palettes. In World B, the real world, I was a woman executing a meticulous escape plan with the precision of a military operation. I broke it down into phases, with clear objectives and timelines, just like any major software deployment. Phase 1, the new life. My first step was to secure my destination. I scheduled a discreet video call with a senior manager in my company's international relocation department. I didn't give her the messy, emotional details. I framed it in professional terms. "My domestic partnership is ending," I said, choosing the words carefully. "The separation needs to be handled with absolute confidentiality for personal and security reasons." They were incredible. They understood immediately. There were no invasive questions. Within a week, they had a comprehensive plan for me. They had arranged for a premium furnished corporate apartment for my first 3 months in Berlin, in a secure building. They had set up a travel stipend and a moving allowance. And, most importantly, they established a secure communication channel. All correspondence regarding my relocation, flight details, housing documents, financial arrangements, was routed to a new, private work email address that I had set up. It was firewalled from my personal accounts and existed on a completely separate server. To Jasper, I was just having a few extra meetings about the technical specs of the project. Phase 2, the old life. This phase required careful, precise timing. The linchpin of the entire operation was the apartment. It was solely in my name. I had bought it with my own savings and a mortgage I paid long before he came into my life. I went to my building's management office and gave my formal, written 60-day notice of termination. The lease would officially end on August 15th. My one-way flight to Berlin was booked for the evening of August 14th. There would be no overlap. Then, I took the next crucial step. I put an ad online to find a new tenant myself. I didn't want the building management showing the apartment while Jasper was there. I conducted the viewings on a Saturday when he was at an all-day branding workshop. I remember showing the apartment to a quiet doctor who worked at the nearby hospital. He was polite and asked few questions. As he looked around the living room, he asked innocently, "Are you and your partner excited about your move?" I felt a lump form in my throat. I forced a smile and said, "Yes, very. It's a big promotion." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. He signed the lease that afternoon in a coffee shop. It would begin on August 16th. The day I left, the apartment would be cleaned. The next day, it would legally belong to someone else. There would be no gray area, no place for Jasper to squat, no ground for him to stand on. Phase 3, the possessions. This was the most logistically complex phase of the operation. I couldn't just pack my bags and leave. My life was here. His life was here. I hired the international moving company recommended by my firm, but I met the supervisor off-site at a Starbucks to give him his instructions. I handed him a detailed, color-coded binder. The instructions were explicit. All of my personal belongings, every book, every piece of clothing, and especially the entire contents of my workshop, were to be professionally packed, crated, and prepared for international shipping. I had itemized lists for every box. All of Jasper's belongings, his extensive wardrobe of designer jackets, his podcasting microphone, his ring lights, his collection of gifted skincare products, were to be packed with equal, meticulous care. They were then to be moved to a top-tier, climate-controlled storage unit. I had already rented the unit online. I put it in his name, using his personal information which I knew by heart, and I paid for the first 3 months in advance. I wasn't cruel, I was methodical. To Jasper, I explained that these were relocation specialists who needed to do a full inventory and assessment for our big international move. His arrogance was my greatest asset. He was so consumed with planning his grand European debut, so utterly certain of his central role in my life, that he never once questioned the process. He never bothered to look at the paperwork. He just saw men with boxes and clipboards and assumed it was all for his benefit. I'll never forget the day they came. He actually walked around, directing them. "Be extra careful with those jackets in the closet," he'd say with an air of importance. "That one is vintage." The supervisor, a burly man named Gus, would just nod grimly, avoiding eye contact with me. At one point, Jasper was busy taking a selfie in the hallway. Gus caught my eye over Jasper's shoulder and gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. I nodded back. We were co-conspirators in my liberation. Phase 4, the digital trail. This was the final, silent cleansing. I filed a mail redirection form with the post office, rerouting all my mail, bank statements, personal letters, everything, to a new, secure P.O. box. I bought a new, cheap burner phone and a new SIM card. I arranged for the new number to be activated the moment my plane was scheduled to leave the ground. Then, one long, quiet evening while Jasper was out at another networking dinner, I performed the digital exorcism. I sat at my computer with a spreadsheet I had prepared. I systematically went through every single shared account we had: Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, our shared grocery delivery service. I changed the password on my accounts and removed his access. I untagged myself from years of photos on his social media. It took hours. With every password changed, with every digital tie severed, I felt lighter. The final weeks were the most surreal period of my life. I felt like a spy, a double agent in my own home. I would come home from a long day of intense technical meetings and project planning to find Jasper excitedly showing me pictures of Parisian cafes he wanted to visit on a weekend trip from Berlin. "Won't this be an amazing backdrop for a post about creative inspiration?" he'd ask. I'd just smile and nod, while in my head, I was calculating the final insurance valuation for my international shipping container. The most therapeutic part, the part that kept me sane through all the deception, was packing my workshop myself. I didn't trust anyone else with my creations. For a week of evenings, I meticulously wrapped each of my keyboards in bubble wrap and custom-cut foam. I labeled every box of components, every tool. These weren't just objects, they were pieces of me. They were the tangible proof of my skill, my patience, my creativity, everything he had dismissed. My clacky plastic toys were my ticket out. One evening, he poked his head into my workshop. I was carefully labeling a box of rare, vintage keyboard switches I had sourced from Japan. He saw the boxes stacked against the wall. "Wow, you're really getting serious about packing up your little toys, huh?" he said with a chuckle. "That's good. I need your help with the color palette for the new living room. I'm thinking something between moody charcoal and sophisticated granite. I didn't even look up from my box. "Just securing my dusty old papers," I replied, my voice perfectly neutral. The day of my flight, August 14th, finally arrived. It was a hot, hazy summer day. The movers had come and gone a few days prior. My life was on a container ship, somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. His life was in a secure, anonymous storage unit in an industrial park by the highway. The apartment was completely, eerily empty. It had been professionally cleaned. It smelled of bleach and possibility. Jasper was at a celebratory farewell brunch with his circle of influencer friends. It was an event he had organized for himself, a final piece of content to be mined from our life together. The theme, according to the elaborate digital invitation he had designed, was Level Up, the next chapter. He planned to meet me at the apartment at 6 p.m. From there, we would go to the airport together to begin our grand European adventure. At 4 p.m., I stood alone in the center of the empty living room. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The silence was immense, a physical presence. I took out my phone and found the email receipt from the storage company. It had the facility's address, the unit number, and the gate access code. I had already left the physical key and the access card in a sealed envelope under his full legal name at the front office of the facility. I took a clear, high-resolution photo of the receipt, making sure every detail was legible. I attached the picture to a text message addressed to him. I wrote no words. No explanation. No goodbye. Just the image. I pressed send. Then I put my old phone in my bag. I took one last look around the empty space that had been my home, then walked out the door for the last time. I didn't lock it. It wasn't mine to lock anymore. At the airport, after I had checked my single suitcase, I found an electronics recycling bin near the food court. I took out my old phone, my old life, and I dropped it inside. It made a hollow, unsatisfying clatter. I took my seat on the plane, by the window. I pulled out my new, cheap, anonymous phone and turned it on. As the plane taxied down the runway, as the engines roared to life and we lifted into the sky, I looked out the window. The city lights spread out below me like a discarded handful of jewels. My old life wasn't just falling away, I was actively flying away from it. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt the quiet, powerful, and relentless hum of a massive engine lifting me into the future. I felt free. It's been 3 weeks since I landed in Berlin. My new city is a beautiful, chaotic symphony of history and modernity. Graffiti-covered remnants of the wall stand next to gleaming glass towers. It feels like a city that understands reinvention. My corporate apartment is sleek, modern, and blessedly, wonderfully quiet. For the first few days, the silence was so profound it was almost loud. I had grown accustomed to the constant background noise of his phone calls, his music, the sound of him filming content in the other room. The job is even more challenging and rewarding than I had dared to hope. I spend my days in intense, collaborative sessions with a team of brilliant engineers from all over the world. They respect my mind, they challenge my ideas, and they value my contributions. I come home exhausted, but it's a good kind of tired. It's the satisfying ache of a brain well used. The freedom is intoxicating, but I'll be honest with you, it's also daunting. The first week was the hardest. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with a jolt of pure panic, my heart pounding, convinced that I'd missed a crucial step in my plan. I had a recurring nightmare that Jasper would somehow find my address, walk through the door with his charming smile, and start explaining how he could improve the creative flow of my new life. I kept finding myself falling into old habits. I'd be in the grocery store and hesitate before putting a certain brand of coffee in my cart, hearing his voice in my head calling it pedestrian. One morning, I spent a full 10 minutes standing in front of my closet, agonizing over what to wear, trying to choose something aspirational. Then I just started laughing, a raw, slightly unhinged sound in the quiet apartment. It was absurd. I could wear whatever I wanted. I could drink whatever coffee I wanted. I could be whoever I wanted. I was deprogramming myself, one small decision at a time. I didn't have to wonder for long what his reaction would be. After exactly 48 hours of silence, the time it would have taken for his self-congratulatory brunch to end, for him to get tired of waiting at the empty apartment, and for his confusion to curdle into white-hot fury, my old, secondary email account became a digital war zone. I had kept it active for just this reason. Reading the flood of messages from him, his friends, and his mother was like being an archaeologist, piecing together the timeline of a distant, catastrophic explosion. He must have finished his brunch, puffed up with self-importance. He would have tried calling my phone, only to get the flat, impersonal "this number is no longer in service" message. Annoyed, he would have checked his texts and seen my single, cryptic image of the storage unit receipt. Confused and irritated, he would have gone to the apartment at 6 p.m. as planned, probably with a lecture prepared about my irresponsibility, ready to sweep his helpless, scattered girlfriend away on their grand adventure. And the new tenant, the quiet doctor just getting off a long hospital shift, would have opened the door. I can picture it so vividly it's like a movie playing in my head. I can see the look on Jasper's face. The charming, camera-ready smile faltering, replaced by confusion, then a flicker of indignation. I can picture him trying to push past the doctor, saying something arrogant like, "Excuse me, I think you're in my apartment." And then the slow, dawning horror, the complete collapse of his reality, as the doctor calmly explained that he'd signed a lease a month ago, a lease that started the day after Ms. Hazel Carter's had ended. The world Jasper had so carefully curated, the entire brand he had built on the foundation of my stability and my income, dissolving into dust on a stranger's doorstep. His first email was a masterpiece of pure, sputtering rage. It was all in caps, filled with typos and exclamation points. He demanded to know where I was, what I had done with his things, and how I dared to humiliate him like this. The messages that followed over the next few days were a chaotic, desperate spiral. There were threats to ruin my reputation, to tell everyone in my industry that I was mentally unstable. Then there were pleas, long, rambling emails about the good times, conveniently forgetting that most of those good times were bankrolled by me. And finally, there were the accusations. I was a sociopath, a narcissist, a cold-hearted monster. Then, as I had predicted, came the emails from his proxies, the flying monkeys sent to do his bidding. His best friend, Caleb, took on the role of the enforcer. His email was dripping with a kind of righteous, second-hand anger. He called me every name in the book, ending with, "He gave you everything, a life you could only dream of, and you threw it away like it was trash. He's on my couch right now, a completely broken man, all because of your selfish, evil actions." His mother, of course, tried the guilt trip. She wrote a long, meandering email about how this cruel, calculated behavior wasn't the sweet, quiet girl she knew. She reminisced about a time I had spent an entire Sunday helping her set up her new computer and transfer all her old photos. "How could a person so patient and helpful be so heartless to my son?" she wrote. She conveniently ignored the fact that her son hadn't lifted a finger to help her. But the real escalation, the dirty, desperate trick that I had, on some level, been preparing myself for, came not through my personal email, but through my new corporate life here in Berlin. Ms. Albright called me into her office one afternoon. Her usually warm face was set in a concerned, serious expression. "Hazel," she said, her voice calm but grave. "I need to make you aware of a situation. We received a rather distressing call at your old office in the States earlier today. It was immediately patched through to our global security team, as per protocol for high-level employees." My blood ran cold. I sat down in the chair opposite her desk, my hands suddenly clammy. "A man identifying himself as your fiancé, a Mr. Jasper Thorne, called the main switchboard," she continued, consulting a note on her screen. "He claimed there was a dire family emergency. A severe medical crisis involving your mother. He was apparently hysterical, crying on the phone, demanding your new contact details and your flight information, saying he needed to get to you immediately." I felt the floor drop out from under me. My mother. She was in perfect health. She lived a quiet life in Arizona, spending her days gardening and playing with her dog. The thought of her, of anyone, getting a panicked, official-looking call because of his vile, selfish lies made me physically sick. Thankfully, Ms. Albright continued, her voice hardening slightly. Our staff followed protocol to the letter. Given the confidential nature of your relocation request, they immediately flagged the call as suspicious. They refused to provide any information whatsoever. They informed Mr. Thorne that in the event of a genuine, verified emergency, the appropriate authorities would be contacted to relay the message directly to you through our channels. He became agitated and then abruptly hung up. I just sat there, staring at her, the sheer, calculated cruelty of his actions washing over me. He would use my own mother's health as a pawn. He would do anything. I took a deep breath and explained the entire situation to her. The controlling relationship, the condescending insults, my decision to make a clean, sharp break. I told her everything. She listened patiently, her expression shifting from concern to a kind of steely anger on my behalf. She was professional, supportive, and incredibly reassuring. The company's security team was already monitoring the situation. But the incident served as a stark, terrifying reminder of how far he was willing to go, how easily he could twist reality and manipulate emotions to try and regain a foothold of control in my life. He didn't care about my mother. He only cared about finding me. A few days after that, a call came through on my new work phone. It was a German number I didn't recognize, but I knew, with a sinking certainty, who it would be connected to. I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. I knew I had to face the fallout head-on. I let it ring 3 times, took a deep, steadying breath, and answered. Hello? Hazel. It was Caleb. And his voice was as sharp and cold as broken glass. You need to fix this, Hazel. Now. Caleb's voice was completely devoid of any of the usual laid-back charm he exuded in Jasper's social media posts. This was not the fun-loving sidekick. This was the cold, hard enforcer. Jasper is a wreck. He's on my couch, he's not eating, he's not working. His life is ruined because of you. He can't even get to his favorite clothes because you hid them somewhere. I took a deep, steadying breath, picturing the quiet, orderly server rooms I designed. I needed that kind of cool, dispassionate logic now. Hello, Caleb, I said, my voice deliberately calm and even. There is nothing to fix. Jasper's life and his emotional state are his own responsibility. He was a guest in my apartment, which I no longer lease. It's as simple as that. A guest, he scoffed, and I could hear the outrage crackle down the line. You lived together for 3 years. He was your partner. He loved you. He was my boyfriend, I corrected him, keeping my voice level. That is a very different legal and financial distinction, as I'm sure you're aware. And his things are not hidden. They are safe, secure, and insured in a climate-controlled storage unit. He has had the address and the access information for weeks. There was a brief pause. I could hear him breathing on the other end. He can't just get his things, Caleb snapped back, his voice rising in frustration. He went there. They told him he needs ID to be on the access list and you didn't put his name on it, you psycho. What was he supposed to do? That was a mistake. A genuine, infuriating oversight in my otherwise flawless plan. My stomach twisted with a brief flash of panic, but I stamped it down. I would not give him the satisfaction of hearing me flustered. An honest oversight in a complicated process, I said coolly. That was my mistake. However, it's a mistake that has already been rectified. I emailed the facilities management company yesterday with a notarized digital authorization to grant him full and unrestricted access. It's been handled. Handled? He practically spat the word through the phone. You detonate a bomb in the middle of his life and you think a single email handles it? He gave up everything for you. He was building a life with you. This was the line. This was the moment where the dam of my carefully constructed calm finally broke. Not with a flood of anger, but with a tidal wave of weary, ice-cold clarity. What did he give up? Caleb? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Tell me, specifically. I would love to know. He didn't have a career to sacrifice, he used my life as his content. He didn't contribute to the mortgage or the bills. He kept his car, which was in his name. He kept his friends. The only thing he lost was free access to my apartment and my income. So let's be very honest with each other about what this is really about. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It was the sound of a bully's narrative collapsing under the weight of a single, simple truth. He had no answer because I was right. It's about you being a cruel, manipulative, cold-hearted coward, he finally settled on, his voice low and venomous. Let me rephrase that for you, I countered, the logic flowing easily now, a shield against his insults. Is it manipulative to accept a career-defining promotion? Is it cruel to leave a relationship where I was told, to my face, that I was an incompetent child who would be living in a gutter without my boyfriend's brilliant guidance? He made his opinion of my capabilities perfectly clear. I simply chose, for the first time, to believe him and act accordingly. I removed myself from his life so he would no longer have to carry the heavy, exhausting burden of managing me anymore. In a way, I did him a favor. I paused, letting that sink in, twisting the knife of his own logic. Then, I delivered the final, decisive blow. And speaking of manipulation, Caleb, please do me a favor and tell Jasper that my employer, a multi-billion-dollar tech corporation with a rather formidable legal team, was not amused by his fraudulent phone call about a fake family emergency. They have it documented. They have the recording. Any further attempts by him, or by you, to contact me, my family, or my colleagues will be referred directly to our corporate legal department as a case of international harassment. There was a stunned, absolute silence. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head as he processed this new, devastating piece of information. Jasper, in his self-pitying narrative, had almost certainly left out the part where he committed a potentially criminal act of harassment against my employer. This isn't over, Hazel, he finally said, but the threat was hollow, a deflated balloon. The power, the control, the narrative, it had all shifted, and he knew it. For me, it is, I replied, and my voice was steady and strong. I am building a new life here. One that I am perfectly capable of managing all on my own. I hung up. I didn't slam the phone down in a dramatic gesture. I just pressed the red icon on the screen and the line went dead. My hand was shaking, but a wave of profound, cleansing relief washed over me. I had faced the dragon's messenger. I hadn't flinched. And I had won. A few days after that phone call, a formal-looking, password-protected PDF was forwarded to me from my company's legal team in Berlin. It was a letter from a high-priced law firm back in the States. It was on behalf of their client, Mr. Jasper Thorne. The war was moving to a new, more official front. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. It's been 6 months now since I moved to Berlin. 6 months since I detonated my old life and started building a new one from the foundations up. The initial turbulence, the fear, the anger, it has all subsided, replaced by the steady, satisfying rhythm of a life that is completely and utterly my own. My sleek corporate apartment no longer feels like a temporary placeholder, it feels like a home. I've slowly filled it with things that bring me joy. I bought a ridiculously comfortable armchair, perfect for curling up in with a book. I've bought plants, and I haven't killed them yet. I've hung art on the walls, art that I chose, that speaks to me, not art that fits a certain brand aesthetic. It's a wonderful, quiet feeling. I'm excelling at the new job. The data center project is massive, a beast of complexity, and my mind feels alive and challenged in a way it hasn't for years. The respect from my colleagues is a given, not something I have to constantly earn or defend. And I found my people. I searched online and found a local hobbyist group for keyboard builders. We meet in a small, shared workshop space in Kreutzberg on the weekends. It's a wonderfully nerdy group of engineers, designers, and artists. We share designs, trade rare components, and help each other troubleshoot firmware bugs. For the first time, I have people to share my clacky plastic toys with, people who see the intricate, clean soldering work on my circuit boards and whistle in genuine appreciation. People who understand the skill involved. It's a kind of belonging I didn't even realize I was missing. But before I could truly settle into this new piece, there was one final, ugly chapter to close. The legal battle. Jasper's lawyer's initial letter was a work of pure, unadulterated fiction. It was so outlandish, so disconnected from reality, that I almost laughed out loud when I first read it in my lawyer's office. He was demanding a 5-figure sum for emotional distress and wrongful abandonment. He was demanding ongoing palimony, a form of financial support for unmarried partners, claiming that he had made significant, non-existent career sacrifices to support my demanding job. He actually claimed that he had acted as my unpaid manager and brand consultant, and was therefore entitled to a retroactive percentage of my salary from the past 3 years. But the most ludicrous demand, the one that was so breathtakingly hypocritical it ascended to a new level of art form, was for half the value of my personal assets. The letter specifically named my collection of custom mechanical keyboards. They were described in pompous legal jargon as valuable, co-owned art pieces that he had provided significant creative consultation and inspiration for. The sheer, unmitigated nerve of it. To try and cash in on the very passion he had relentlessly mocked and belittled. He saw my hobby, my sanctuary, as worthless childish junk until the moment he thought he could assign a dollar value to it and claim it as his own. It was the ultimate distillation of his character. I never responded directly. I didn't have to. My company's legal department, as part of the comprehensive support included in my relocation and promotion package, took over completely. Their response was not a letter, it was a surgical strike. It was a masterclass in calm, corporate obliteration. They didn't use angry, emotional words, they used cold, hard, verifiable facts. They broke down his entire fantasy, point by painful point. On legal status, they began by politely pointing out that we were not married. We had no joint assets. We had no shared bank accounts. We had no legal partnership of any kind. Therefore, his claims for palimony and asset division had absolutely no basis in law. On the apartment, they produced a copy of the original lease agreement, solely in my name, and the legal notice of termination I had filed in accordance with all local regulations. He was, in the cold, clear eyes of the law, a long-term guest with no tenant rights whatsoever. On his possessions, they provided the signed contract for the climate-controlled storage unit, proving my due care and diligence in preserving his property. They also included the receipts showing that I had paid for the first 3 months of storage fees out of my own pocket, an act of goodwill he was now trying to exploit. On the abandonment and career sacrifice claim, they countered this fantasy with cold, hard documentation. My signed promotion acceptance letter. The official relocation package from HR. All of it dated weeks before my departure. This proved, beyond any doubt, that my move was a planned, professional step in my career, not a whimsical act of personal abandonment. They also subtly noted that his claims of career sacrifice were not substantiated by any evidence of him having a stable career to sacrifice in the first place. And then, after systematically dismantling his entire case, they moved from defense to offense. The final section of the letter was titled Counterclaim Considerations. It was a formal complaint regarding Mr. Thorne's actions. They included a professionally logged timeline of the harassing emails sent by him and Caleb. And, most damningly, they included a detailed, time-stamped report from the corporate security team about his fraudulent phone call to my former office, in which he misrepresented himself and faked a family medical emergency in an attempt to illicitly obtain my private information. The letter concluded with a sentence that was as polite as it was bone-chilling. It stated that any further legal action from him would be considered vexatious litigation and an act of continued harassment. Furthermore, it stated that should he persist, the company would not hesitate to fully support me in filing a formal, international complaint for harassment, providing their own security logs, recordings, and employee testimony as evidence. The response from his high-priced lawyer was immediate and absolute silence. A week later, my legal team received a terse, one-sentence email stating that their client, Mr. Thorne, was withdrawing all claims. Faced with the unblinking, bureaucratic power of a multi-billion-dollar corporation and the very real, documented threat of a harassment charge that could do irreparable damage to his precious online brand, his bluff had been called. He folded instantly. And so, the Great War was officially over. The legal documents were filed away. The threats stopped. But there's always an aftermath, isn't there? The dust has to settle. If you've been listening this far, if my story has resonated with you in any way, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. It would mean the world to me. Please help me out by liking this video and just commenting the number 1 down below in the comments section. It's a simple thing, but it lets me know that you're still here, that you're listening, and that I'm not just talking out into the void. It tells me that we're in this together, that you're on this journey with me. Your support is a huge encouragement, more than you know. So please, just comment the number 1 so I can see you. And now, let me tell you how it all finally ended. I heard about what happened next in bits and pieces, through my sister, Maya. We have a video call every Sunday. She's my lifeline to the world back home. She has a friend from work who is dating Caleb's cousin, so the information was a little bit like a game of telephone, but it painted a very clear, and rather pathetic, picture. First, as predicted, Jasper had to pay his lawyer for his time. Launching a frivolous, multi-pronged international legal claim isn't cheap. That 5-figure sum he had so arrogantly demanded from me likely ended up being a 5-figure bill for him. Maya heard he had to sell his sports car, the one he was always featuring in his posts, to cover the cost. Then, the 3 months of storage fees that I had prepaid ran out. The expensive monthly fee for the top-tier, climate-controlled unit became his responsibility. According to Maya's source, he tried to get Caleb to split the cost with him, arguing that Caleb was his best friend and should support him in his time of crisis. This apparently led to a massive, friendship-ending fight. He eventually had to rent a U-Haul truck himself and, over one humiliating weekend, move all of his carefully curated belongings, the designer jackets, the podcasting equipment, the dozens of pairs of pristine white sneakers, into his parents' dusty, spider-filled suburban garage. The fall from a sleek city apartment to a concrete slab next to a lawnmower must have been a bitter pill for his precious Bren to swallow. His extended stay on Caleb's couch also came to an unceremonious end. Apparently, Caleb's girlfriend got tired of being an unpaid therapist to a 35-year-old man-child who did nothing but lie on her sofa, scroll through his phone, and complain about how his cruel, ungrateful ex had ruined his perfect life. She gave Caleb an ultimatum, him or me. Caleb chose his girlfriend. The last Maya heard, Jasper was working a second job. A real job. A mind-numbing data entry position for an insurance company, arranged by his father. He was living in a small, rented room in a shared house out in the suburbs. He still posts online, of course. His brand is his entire identity. But the content has changed. It's less about the glamorous, jet-setting lifestyle and more about overcoming adversity, healing from betrayal, and finding authenticity in simplicity. There was, as I always knew there would be, zero self-awareness. In the grand narrative of his life, he will always be the hero, always the victim. My revenge, if you can even call it that, was not an act of aggression. It was not a fiery confrontation or a bitter war. It was an act of radical self-reliance. It was quiet, it was methodical, and it was absolute. I simply took him at his word. He told me I couldn't survive without him. So I created a life where I had to. And in doing so, I proved him, and the small, terrified part of myself that had started to believe his lies, completely and utterly wrong. In my beautiful, quiet apartment here in Berlin, my collection of custom keyboards are displayed on custom-built floating shelves. They are the first thing you see when you walk in. They are not toys. They are not clutter. They are trophies. They are art. They are mine. I am currently working on my most ambitious project yet. It's a fully wireless, split ergonomic keyboard with a low-profile aluminum case, magnetic connectors, and custom-written firmware that syncs the RGB lighting effects across both halves without a connecting cable. It's a complex, beautiful, and challenging structure. It's a testament to what a person can build with precision, patience, and a clear vision of their own. All the qualities he told me I didn't have. I don't hate Jasper. I truly don't. To hate him would be to give him space in my head, and I'm no longer willing to do that. I feel a distant, almost clinical pity for him. He is a man trapped in an image he built, a brand with no foundation. He thought his greatest skill was managing me, his greatest project. In truth, his greatest, most catastrophic failure was his complete inability to manage himself. By leaving, I didn't just take away his comfortable lifestyle, I took away his project. I took away the person whose success he could leech off of to validate his own fragile, hollow ego. And in doing so, I gave myself back to myself. I survived. But more than that, I am thriving. I am building something better, something stronger, and something that is entirely, gloriously, my own. Thank you so much for listening to my whole story. It means more than you can imagine. If you've been through something similar, or if any part of this resonated with you, please share your thoughts in the comments below. I promise you, I read them all. And please, if you haven't already, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories. It truly does help me continue to do this. Be well, be strong, and never let anyone tell you that you can't survive on your own. And so, this story leaves us with a profound reminder: true strength lies not in seeking validation from others, but in recognizing and reclaiming our own worth. Hazel's journey teaches us that no matter how deeply we may feel trapped or diminished, there is always a way to rise, to rebuild, and to rediscover the power within ourselves. It's not about revenge or proving someone else wrong, it's about proving to yourself that you are enough, that you are capable, and that you deserve a life filled with respect, love, and authenticity. Life will inevitably present challenges, and people may try to shape your narrative to fit their needs. But as Hazel demonstrated, the key to freedom is courage, the courage to walk away from what no longer serves you, to trust your instincts, and to take bold steps toward a future you design for yourself. Each of us has the ability to rewrite our story, no matter how long we've been living in someone else's version of it. What did this story mean to you? Have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose yourself? Share your thoughts below, or simply comment good if this reflection resonated with you. Let's inspire and support each other to keep moving forward.